My name's Matthew Zapata. This is Stories of Our People. I'm here with my co-host Max, and today we are here with Rey Rodríguez here to talk about his story. So, I'll spend a little bit. How are you, Ray?
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is really, I'm so proud that you guys are doing this. This is great.
So first, we like to start off with like a basic question, like we never really got into like your childhood during our experience together when in Mexico, where we spent that week-long trip. So I would like to ask you, what was your childhood like?
Okay. So I was born in Paso, Texas. So I lived there about 2 years. My mother is from Durango, and my father's Spanish, and they had married in Durango. So there came a period where they had to leave Mexico, and so they came to El Paso, and then in El Paso they kind of made their life there, but there through various kind of setbacks, there came a time that my father started getting a master's in teaching from UTEP, and he became a teacher. So when I was 2, he got a job in a place called Durango, Colorado, at Fort Lewis College. So we left El Paso, and we went in a little car, a Corvair. They're cars that are unsafe at any speed, and we packed up this little car, and we went to Durango. So my mom's from Durango, and we went to a place called Durango, Colorado. So, as you all know, that part of Colorado used to be Mexico.
Yeah.
So it has a Chicano community. Maybe a quarter of it was Chicano, and the other 3/4 was white. And there were indigenous people, but not so many. Many would either attend Fort Lewis College, which has its own kind of racist history, but is a very fascinating place. Much of it was not told, and I'm only now at my age am I starting to learn more about Fort Lewis and what it had done to kind of different indigenous people. But when I was growing up, my father was able to, because he was a professor at the college, he was able to buy a house. So they bought a little house, kind of in a white neighborhood, and then I went to school at a parochial school called Sacred Heart, where most of the Chicanos were. So it was very interesting that even in a little town like that, it was segregated. But we didn't care because it was kind of like we were just kind of with our people, and Sacred Heart was a very interesting place. The year prior to that, my father had gone to Spain for a year to kind of finish off a PhD at the University of Madrid. Wow. And we had a little apartment there. So I lived, I guess probably when I was around 6, we left and we went to Spain. I was in Madrid. And
how was the difference on like living in the U.S. compared to Spain? Was that
oh man,
drastic?
It was pretty drastic, but it was kind of interesting because, like, kind of like we talked about in the class. There's this idea of Spain and then the New World,
right?
And so it was for me. It was great because we had a little apartment. I would sleep on 2 chairs. We'd push them together, and I was small enough that I'd sleep in the 2 chairs, and it was a 1-bedroom apartment. And my brother would sleep on the sofa, and then my mom and dad would be in the 1 bedroom. And we had a lot of liberty. There's a lot of freedom. It was interesting because it was around the time that Franco was still in power. So a dictator is still running the place. You would still see military, kind of like desfiles, that would be going on, and it was really pretty interesting. My first school, I went and they put me in a British school, And I remember when I was there at the British school, I didn't know how to read because, in the United States for first grade, I didn't have kindergarten. So I was just kind of thrown there. So I was 6 or 7, and we were sitting kind of at a table kind of like this, and they whipped out this book, and the teacher says, okay, you start reading. So like I was at the end of the table, and then all these little kids would start reading a portion of the book, and I was sweating. I was just like, oh my God, they're gonna ask me to read, and they're gonna find out I'm illiterate. So I'm right there, and boom, boom, boom. Right about when they're gonna reach me to tell me, okay, you read, Ray, the bell rings. I went, whew. So then I leave. We go to another class, and then what happens is that I tell my, hey, this school is just too advanced for me. So they put me in this other school where it's basically all art. They gave me a little apron, and I was just making art. And I went home, and I said, that school's too easy. And then they put me in a school that was bilingual. It was Spanish in the morning, English in the afternoon, which I loved. Because my first teacher, she was just this gorgeous Spanish woman. And whatever she said, then I would study. I was like, this is a great thing. But I remember there was a kid behind me who wanted to pick on me. And so at recess, he started chasing me. And I started running. And we're running. And there was just a little playground. But it's not like a playground, like at Oakwood or anything like that. But it was more like a playground where they had pillars. And it had just rained. So we were running around this little plaza, and I slipped, and I went right into the corner, and I busted my head and started bleeding. I remember that. So then they took me home. But that's the type of environment I was in. But I loved that environment because it was bilingual.
Yeah.
I would work on my Spanish, and I work on my English. So I got exposure of being that it was okay to speak both languages. So the beauty of that 1 year in Spain was that when I went back to Durango is a very small town, around 10,000 people. I always knew there was a world outside of Durango. So kind of like what you're doing here is that you're helping people figure out that there's a whole world out there. So whatever little community they live in, whether it's, a small area of, let's say it's Pacoima or whatever it is,
right.
A lot of people think that that's their world. And it's not until someone takes them out, kind of like what I did with you guys. Like we went to Mexico.
Exactly, yeah.
So the whole point of that is really kind of reminiscent of what my parents had done in a sense of taking me out of this little dinky little town where there are 10,000 people. And a lot of people after high school would stay there, which is fine. But I always knew that there was a world out there. And I think that was the power of immersion, this 2-week program. To take you first to show you Los Angeles and different parts of Los Angeles that maybe you wouldn't have seen, and then to take you Oaxaca and then make you Mexico City, and then do a direct connection between 1519 and where we are now in 2024.
Right. I mean, I think it's always like a good idea to like kind of understand exactly where you came from. I'm sure your trip in Spain probably did that to you too. Gained you this. Well, it made you want to like research where exactly you came from.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's what we want to do here, and this is what I plan to do after I graduate from Oakwood. So, I mean, that's a really good thing to do.
With that said, on touching on your immersion program, the immersion program itself, and the program, it was the exploring and debunking the myths of the Spanish conquest. When did you start that program at Oakwood?
So I started that during COVID. I had purchased a book called The Myths of the Spanish Conquest, and we changed it to The Myths of the Spanish Invasion. But it was this idea of I wanted to kind of put together a class because I'm writing a novel that I think would introduce people to the complexity of what it is to be Mexican, the complexity of what it is to be Latino, the complexity of all of these stories that are rarely told, and then I think that you both are seeking. We need these stories. Not just because they're nice to have, but I think fundamentally because they're a form of protection. At a time when you have a presidential candidate and now president-elect who calls us vermin or calls us that we're poisoning the blood of this country, our counter narrative to that must be told.
Yeah.
Like, it's a form of protection. I mean, people died in Walmart, in 2022 when a gunman drives 900 miles just to shoot, Mexican Americans and Mexicans at a Walmart. 23 were killed, or another 22 were hurt. But all of that was really this discourse and this ignorance about like who we are and what we do.
Right.
So,
especially nowadays too, it's just like I feel like not only that, but like so many like young people don't exactly know where they came from. They've like lost like what exactly it means to be Mexican, or I mean, they get this experience from their families kind of, but they don't really know where they originated from or how they got here in the first place. So I think
it's the roots.
Yeah.
It's that connection to the past. It's the understanding that it's these generations you don't hear about, you don't see anymore, that got you to that point.
yes.
And the reason you're here now and you have everything you have now is because of those people that are unsung, those stories that are unheard. So that's, touching on your point about protection, I think that's a major part of it. It's this kind of dogma, for lack of a better word, of this idea that, like you said, there's a president who says we're vermin. There's a whole half of the country who believe that, when in reality, being Latino, being Hispanic, especially, it's just so complex.
Yeah.
And it's something that needs to be told and needs to be heard. And it's just not just by the wider United States, but by Latinos and Latinas that are here.
Yes.
They're here now who don't know that.
I think, and you saw it when you went to Mexico, just the diversity of it. And, when they went to Montalban, like the power of an indigenous past and the knowledge that we need to learn about that. Wow, that's incredible, right?
Flattened the top of a mountain to build pyramids, and I remember scaling up those pyramids, and I think that they had no modern machinery, dragging those stones up there, because they didn't have what we have now. So I think that's the incredible part about that. It's missing.
Yeah.
It's truly missing. And, you hear about that, and you're like, wow. It's no easy feat with modern machinery, let alone with what they had. So I think that's, just touching back on what you said, it's that protection and that power in that history and knowing that.
Yeah, there's no way that if you know anything that you could even articulate that someone's vermin when they come from royalty. Right?
Yeah.
And they come from like a proud civilization that aligned its cities with the cosmos. They knew all this mathematics. They already had the written word down. There's all of this wisdom that, we gained, and all of these gifts that we gave the world. So the whole idea of corn, the whole idea of tomatoes, there's all of these things that the world kind of takes for granted and doesn't realize it. That took millennia to cultivate and to domesticate and then later give. So
yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that now that the elect since Donald Trump has been elected, he's like, we're seeing a more push away from these like diverse studies, from like maybe Chicano studies or all types of different studies. So I mean, that's sad to see, and hopefully, they don't take that away.
Yeah, I think so. Now it's incumbent on us to, like what you're doing. This YouTube channel, it's really a lifesaver. It's something that you should be very proud of, because we need to get the word about our beauty, about our strength, about our knowledge, and everything that we contribute to this country, because the country itself couldn't exist without us.
Yeah, and I want to touch back on going back to immersion and what you did that first year. And I know you mentioned how that this is like a form of protection and education and teaching students about this history, but have you seen this evolve over time? I know because of COVID, you had restrictions, you couldn't really travel. Do you remember the first traveling to Mexico or wherever you did, and how different that was, and how maybe it impacted students, and how that changed them?
The first year we didn't travel. So the first year, because of COVID, we just stayed in Los Angeles. So really what we tried to do is leverage everything that's in this city and show excuse me, kind of like how indigenous culture already exists here. So it was never erased. It was never conquered, it was never truly something that could be ignored. And so I think we were able to show people through food. We were able to show people through, going to Tia Chuchas and kind of talking about how, that cultural center is very much aligned with many, teachings and practices of indigenous people, and how all of that is tied back to, the past. That the past is very relevant to the present. So you didn't just kind of like spontaneously emerge. And I think we tried to plant the seed of this idea that imagine if the Spanish, when they came here, had seen indigenous people as equals. If they had seen that instead of asking for gold, they had said, teach me. Teach me how you align your cities with the cosmos. Teach me how, you have a city that's more beautiful and larger than any city in Europe. Tenochtitlan is this incredible place that, rose and fell with the lake. It was a city on a lake, which is incredible. It had 60,000 people there and maybe another 200,000 people in the surrounding areas of the lake, in the various lakes, and nothing like that. So when the Spanish came, they didn't have any reference to that. And then just imagine building a whole civilization without brass. Really, it's based on obsidian. So I think, it's an incredible thing. So the idea would be is if the Spanish had come and said, hey, teach me, like instead of implanting this seed of racism that somehow they were superior and somehow their culture and everything else. And, instead of planting this idea that indigenous people were less than, if they had said they're equal, imagine what it would be 500 years later. Like, think about what our cities would look like.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that is a good point, but then it also comes up again how disease might have played a role in that too, because obviously once the Spaniards came in and disease was such an issue that, if they were try to be like more friendly, try to learn like just they've been using, the natives have been using, maybe we kind of gone to somewhere like you said, but like disease obviously would have like destroyed most of the civilization.
Yeah. But I think they didn't care, and it helped them in war.
Yeah.
So the people were dying in the thousands, and they didn't care if they died because they didn't even know if they had souls. So you're right, but I think they probably would have taken another stance, and I think you wouldn't have lost like all of the books that were written by the Maya and other indigenous people.
Right.
I mean, those are burned by De Landa and others simply because they thought they were satanic. They were all satanic rituals. Instead of all of this astronomy was probably lost. The oldest book of the Americas is the Códice de México. It's 900 years old, and it tracks, the path of Venus and Jupiter. I mean, how many people know about the Códice de México and how important it is, and that it's the oldest American book
that survived
of the Americas? Yeah, like we should all know that.
I think the crazy part, that's the only one that survived.
Yeah,
and it's something that's just a testament to the destruction and brutality that were brought upon by the Spaniards, but also to the fact that, going back to the immersion and what you bring, that knowledge that you're teaching these students, and there's a history that you can learn that is not really told, and that is like fundamental and vital. That needs to be learned. It needs to be told. So, I mean, to be honest, I think it's incredible, and that's why I remember looking at this immersion. When I first saw it, I was like, I need to be in this, and I need to learn about this because it's. To be blunt, it felt fundamental, and after going to Mexico and going through this process, it felt empowering. But, with that said, I was also to touch back on your childhood, and I was wondering how that transition was from living in Colorado and then going to Cornell that first year. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, I'm an interesting character because, just going back to the story, I'm kind of like half Mexican, half Spanish, and born, I'm a U.S. citizen, so I get to pick and choose the best of all of these different cultures. And so, at a very young age, I was a shoeshine boy. I would have my own money, and so I had my own car. So basically, I drove from Durango to Ithaca. So I drove cross country with a friend of mine from high school. I dropped him off in Tarrytown, New York, and then I drove into Ithaca. Now, at that time, there was no internet. There was nothing. There were no cell phones, nothing. So the only thing I knew about Ithaca was, the Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica. There was a little picture of one of the buildings that's part of Cornell. So that's all I knew about the school. And the only reason I knew that I should go to Cornell was that I had gotten into the University of Denver. I got into Cornell. Cornell was a better school. I went to Cornell. No other reason.
That's it.
That's it. And now I'm driving in a car. And I'm going to this little town in Ithaca, not knowing anyone or anything. And I went there, and I get into my dorm room. And when I'm there, it's funny because they would just have a bed. There were 2 beds because you had a roommate. So I had a bed. I didn't know to get sheets, but I had a sleeping bag, so I rolled out my sleeping bag. And I got to get in early, one day early. So here I am. I lay out the sleeping bag. I get in my sleeping bag, and I'm looking at, and it's kind of cinder block walls. I didn't have any posters or anything like that. I'm just sitting there, and I'm going, wow, what did I do?
I think that's actually probably what most college students are doing on their first couple of days there, but yeah.
It's very funny because then, my roommate was this black friend of mine from Detroit. He was a football player and really extraordinary student and really very, very quiet, very introverted. And I am just full extrovert. And I'm asking him all these questions. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? Anyway, so it was just a great experience. So for me, every experience was just another adventure. So even the kind of the strange, because when I was there was no Chicano organization or anything like that. So a group of us created MASA, the Mexican American Student Association. We called it MASA because, it's like masa. So we were kind of like, this is kind of cool. Yeah. So, and it was great. We had like 30 students, in the first semester. We're kind of, really happy. By the next semester, so, you make it through fall, for spring semester, half of the students were gone.
Half.
And most Chicanos came from either California or Texas. So very warm climates. Ithaca was very cold. I had gone to school in Colorado, higher elevations. I was used to snow, those types of things. But wow, that was really, because you never hear from these guys. They were gone, because you didn't have Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. You'd lose touch with these people. They were gone. So it was a little disconcerting. But because I had driven like 2,500 miles, there was no way I was going to fail. Like, I had burned the boat. I was gone. I was never coming back. And I remember when I got my first paper, my first English paper, man, it was all just red. It was just bloodied. It was just like, and I was like, man, how am I going to do this? So I just went to the teacher and I said, like, you got to help me here because, like, what's going on? She goes, okay, we're going to do this. And she, so it was kind of like, I think to answer your question, it was like, I had gone to a small public school in a small town, and now I was competing against these kids that had gone to schools kind of like Oakwood and other schools. They had read all the books before. I remember I went to the calculus class, and the guy next to me was taking a nap. And I'm taking down all the notes, like, I'm like, where? And I'm like, hey, I wake him up. I said, hey, you got to take notes. He goes, I saw that book last year. I'm just taking this because I'm pre-med and I need it for an easy A. And I'm like, wow, I better get the heck out of this class. Because, so those are kind of the things. So I was starting to learn that I wasn't prepared, that I was going to have to start, kind of like from a step back and then build up.
I think just it's a testament to that work ethic. Because I think correct me if I'm wrong, what also helped drive you to do that was the fact that you drove so many miles away from home.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, that you burnt the boat. There's no turning back. And I think, there's a lot of things I want to touch on, but just that part of pushing through it is something that, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
But I think that's kind of very similar to just the immigrant experience.
Yeah.
You burn the boat. You're here. You're ready to rock and roll. Like, it's so... Any setback, you just, okay, that's a setback. Now I got to just keep going. So that first semester was really hard. It was hard. Kind of like... But I was so joyful. There were 9 million books in the library. There were Nobel Prize winners that were coming to campus, and I could go to their lectures and I could hear them, and there were, all of these opportunities to, I got a job in the library, so I'd get to,
took advantage of all that resources.
I'd get to, and then, there was a kind of like a small resource for, minority students to kind of get together. We would help each other out. But it's, I think it was just so up north. Yeah. And at the time, there weren't that many students. But what's kind of interesting is that we were standing on the shoulders, kind of what you were talking about black kids that had come like maybe a decade earlier. And they had done sit-ins, and they had done, they had created the Africana Studies program. They had done a lot of work to try to almost decolonize the university. So there were like now institutions that we could use to kind of like stand on that would help us at least stay. But it was hard for kids to kind of like stay in that environment because it was so forward.
Yeah. And like how, since it was like predominantly white, like how was it being a Latino there in the space? Like,
what's really interesting when you get there, a lot of Boricua. So you'd meet a lot of Puerto Ricans, a lot of Dominicans, some Cubans. So you start meeting other Latinos. And you're like, oh, this is different. And so, the parties were great, because there was a lot of salsa. So I didn't know salsa. So I kind of had to learn salsa, and I had to start learning the music. So culturally, it becomes kind of interesting because you start gravitating to try and, where can I hear Spanish? Like, where are places that I'm going to, feel at home? And there were many Puerto Ricans that were coming from New York or Long Island. And so there was kind of a base for that. So that was good. And then Masa was helpful, kind of meeting. And I think part of it is, you just start getting used to being in spaces where you're the only one.
Yeah, exactly.
So for Masa, how did you start that? Like, it was 6, you said 30 originally? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was like 30, and then it went to about 15.
How did that group of 30 students come together, and like, what was that like?
Part of it was there was an administrator, and the administrator was really this Chicano. He had been at Stanford, and had just come over to Cornell. So his thing was to try to retain students.
Yeah.
So he kind of like got us together the first time, and then it was basically, hey, what do you guys want to do? Kind of like Somos Unidos or those types of things.
I noticed that actually, that like the issues, because I was a co-leader in like maybe in sophomore year. So both of us were. The main issue that most clubs have at Oakwood is actually like retaining members, which is, especially for like diversity groups, seems like a very like big issue. Like even now, I think 3 weeks ago I went to Somos again, and I noticed there's like 6 of them there, like, and it's kind of sad because obviously you want to see more Latinos, Chicanos there. So it's just about how do you like.
Well, I think the hard thing too, especially at least at that age, is that you just want to fit in, right?
Yeah.
So the last thing you want to say is like, "Oh, I'm Chicano," like, because that will somehow distinguish, especially when there aren't that many Chicanos, around.
Did you feel like there was a similar sentiment for some students in Cornell at that time as well?
Oh yeah, there were definitely kids. Throughout the whole thing was like box checkers. People that didn't want to identify, and they would check that they were Mexican American or Chicano or whatever, and thinking that they might get some advantage, but that never really worked out. I mean, the thing is that there's just a great need, I think. The truth always comes out, and I think the thing is that regardless of all of that, those schools need us. Those schools kind of need to make space, so I went back to Cornell like maybe 25 years later, and it's really flourishing. Like the organizations that they have now are much bigger. There are many more faculty. There were no Chicano professors or, kind of like, because I'd take classes in economics and in history. There were none. And now you have some really well-prepared people telling stories that we need to hear, comparable to kind of like what you're thinking about here and talking about, who are doing the work that needs to be done to tell our stories and make sure and that's at Cornell, which is, at a high level.
So
there's some hope.
Yeah, and I actually kind of experienced that too. I mean, most of these schools are pushing towards like more diversity, like obviously hiring more people of color, and then stuff too. Like recently, like last year, I went to Knox. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Yeah, there's such an amazing space. It's like all these people like telling like some part of their story or background. That it's like I feel like we need more of that. Like more conferences like that appeal to different people of color, whoever that may be.
Well, I think both of you are very privileged in the sense of like being able to first you have Jaime Dominguez, like one of the few head of schools of any private school, and then you have a group of teachers, very interested in supporting you and kind of making sure you succeed. And I think the idea is Oakwood is very small. When you go off to college, you're going to see that college is huge.
Yeah. So
the idea is those big places, those big institutions, you want to make them small. So how you do that will be interesting. So the challenge with a place like Oakwood is like you have only 80 students per class.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about that, the percentage of Latino students is relatively small. And it's even smaller for those that want to identify or that need that protection in a sense. So I wouldn't let it get you down about it, just because of the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, and to counter that, we went to a small community college, LAMC, and then we actually started taking like courses like Chicano courses. We mentioned to you in the first 2 days, I believe, is that we took 3 whole courses of Chicano studies prior to the immersion stuff, or like for like a year before the course. So
that's great. And that's all protection for you guys.
Yeah,
because and especially Chicano writing right now it's almost a renaissance. There's some really interesting people who are just doing some phenomenal stuff.
I actually have a question about Masa. So second year or second semester where you dropped down to 15 students?
Second semester.
How did that from your first year there, second, third, and fourth, how did that change? And like what changes did you make to be more inclusive to students? Like how did you try to help other students who were coming in a similar situation as you maybe, or Latino or Latina students are their first time there and they have this community? Like what steps did you take?
Yeah. So then we knew there was a problem, right? Because half of the students or at least, it was a big number. I don't know if it's exactly half, but it was a big number of people. So we had to kind of like start thinking about retention. So anytime you would, we got involved with admissions. So when students would get accepted, then we would call them up and would kind of tell them, what to expect coming to Cornell. And it's a hard pitch, to say, leave your family, leave everything that you're comfortable with, and come to this little small town and try to kind of like get an education. Whereas if you stayed in, let's say you're coming from Los Angeles, if you stayed in Los Angeles, you could be around your family, you could get, a similar education. So a lot of that was having to just tell our stories. And then, students would fly out, we would kind of like, we would do different things to kind of like show them around campus. So there were things like that were done that we tried to do. And it was somewhat successful. It's still very challenging and very hard, just because it's a relatively small place. So the numbers didn't really increase a lot, but those that did stay, kind of like definitely got accustomed to being involved, like to giving a hand, and in ensuring that at least those that did stay stayed. And then there was kind of like when I was around there was a Latino fraternity that started. So and that fraternity is still in existence. I didn't want to get involved in fraternities. I wasn't kind of like a big fan of that, but that's part. The Greek life is kind of like something that is part of. I had gotten involved in the International Living Center. That's where I lived in the dorms, and then I also lived a semester at in Cornell, in Washington. So I lived in D.C. for a semester. So my junior year, I wasn't really involved that much in Masa because I wasn't there for part of it. Mm-hmm. But so basically, and then that administrator that had been helpful, my freshman year left. When I was a senior. So yeah, so things kind of like changed quite a bit, but I think it's much better now. It's super exciting. Kind of all of the support, all of the. I think if you want to go to Cornell, and you're of low income, you'll get a free ride. There's lots of ways of ensuring that if you go to Cornell, you will be able to stay there. Whereas, when I was there weren't that many merit scholarships. There weren't that many, like I came out of Cornell with some debt, not a lot, but at the time I thought it was a lot, but it was okay because I paid that over 10 years, in addition to law school, and also I got a master's at the Woodrow Wilson School, or it used to be called the Woodrow Wilson School, but it's the School of International Affairs at Princeton. So I combined that with a law degree.
I actually have a question. Why did you move to Princeton to get your master's?
Well, I went there because it's a full ride.
Full ride.
They have this endowment that's incredible. So the great thing about graduate school is that there's money. So you can almost do anything you want to do, and seek out those programs to get full rides. Especially in the sciences, it's a full ride. So the idea is get through your undergrad, and then for graduate school, kind of seek out programs where you'll get a full ride. Princeton's different from Harvard. Harvard generally doesn't have they don't have the endowment like Princeton does. Mm-hmm. So between those two public policy schools, Princeton it has those resources. That may have changed now. I don't know, but at least at the time, that's what was going on, and I think it was a no-brainer.
And really quick, from Princeton, why did you move to Berkeley to pursue law, instead of like pursuing law in Princeton?
Well, Princeton doesn't have a law school.
Oh, okay.
But the master's program, to kind of address that issue, they do a joint degree. Mm-hmm. So you can have a joint master's in public policy and a law degree. And when I did I had never really intended to go to law school, but when I was in the master's program, I was thinking if I really want to do public policy work, then I need to combine it with a law degree. I found out about the program my first semester there, and then I applied, and I wanted to come out west, so I only applied to 2 schools, Berkeley and UCLA. I got into both schools. Berkeley was higher ranked, so I went to Berkeley. I was very, very practical in my decisions.
So, how different was the diversity if you compare the 3 schools of it? Like, if you compare Princeton to Cornell to Berkeley, how different was that, and how was it adapting to those environments? I mean, comparing it to what we talked about prior.
Yeah, it's interesting because Cornell is a public and private school. So it has an agricultural school, which is a public, and it has the arts and sciences, which I went to, which is a private school. So it has the benefit of both a public and private, and kind of making it more diverse than some of the other Ivies, and just different. So when I went to Princeton in the master's program, it's kind of like they only accept 80 students, so it's a very small program, and so if you get in, you're treated. They go, oh, there's all these administrators. How are you doing? What's going on? So when I got into Berkeley Law, it's probably a class of around, I want to say 200 students.
Okay.
And what's fascinating about that, at a public school, they care less whether you succeed or fail or not. You sink or swim on your own. So very different environments. And there were so many more Chicanos that were, at Berkeley. Like there was a whole La Raza office. So, you could just go to that office and I have a lot of dear friends that I met just as part of that. And at Princeton, there were maybe 2 or 3 Latinos.
2 or 3 in the program itself.
Yeah.
Did you
out of the 80.
Out of the 80, and then no administrators, or not really, or like
there
professors?
There were black administrators, but no Latinos, none. And that was a big push, and we brought in visiting professors to teach certain classes, and I became president of the student association, and also that we put together kind of because there weren't that many students that were Latino, then we put together like a multicultural student association, and so then we started advocating for diversifying not only the students but the faculty, those types of things.
Yeah. So in Berkeley, I want to make sure there was a lot more. I just want to kind of reiterate this point that you mentioned. There's a lot more Latinos there, and you had that LASA program and all of that. How did
specifically they're Chicanos, which was very different.
How is that different? You could just compare to what you mentioned prior about Princeton and Cornell. How is that different, having that kind of Chicano and having that much bigger?
Well, you don't have to explain things anymore. You don't have to be in a situation that you're constantly explaining yourself. If you're in a kind of generally in a uniquely white, or kind of like a space where there are few Latinos, every day you're explaining to yourself, or someone's trying to talk to you in Spanish, then really bad Spanish, or someone's has no clue about you, and they will have just strange uneducated views of kind of like what it is to be Latino, which but at Berkeley, you no longer have to explain that. There are other issues just in terms because then you have Chicanos from all over California, and they'll have different life experiences. There's one that's now he's sitting on the Supreme Court of Washington State. He had a Japanese and Mexican background, so he spoke Japanese and Mexican. So he's very proud of being Chicano, and he was very proud of being Japanese, and that's really unique. So
you can.
I think what's really great about Berkeley is that it attracts phenomenal students, And this was before affirmative action was kind of was, attacked, so that there were many more Chicanos than there were, after I graduated. So things did change, but because the numbers are so high here in California, you still have a great community of Chicanos that are kind of there and that are doing incredible work, really.
Yeah. Question for you: when you were getting your law degree, why did you go? Why did you choose to do entertainment? Why did you go?
I never thought I'd be an entertainment lawyer. What I did is when I my first year, because my parents at the time had lost everything, so economically I had to get a pretty high paying job. And what happens is in law school, between your summer, you can apply to work at very large firms, and at the time they were paying a fair amount of money. Mm-hmm. So so I got an offer, which was unusual for a first year to get an offer to work over the summer at a law firm, especially a big law firm, simply because it's there's so much competition. But they gave me a chance, and so I went to Paul Hastings, and I worked here in downtown LA. And so when I left law school, I went back to Paul Hastings and worked there after working at other, like a New York law firm and another big LA firm. So I went there. So when I graduated, I went into corporate law. Okay. I had no idea I would be doing entertainment law, none whatsoever.
How did you eventually get into Disney?
So it was just by accident. So the way I got into there is that a woman went on maternity leave, and a partner came into my office at Paul Hastings and said, "Hey, do you want to get?" They call it seconded, which means that you'll work for a client for a period of time, but then you'll be able to come back to the law firm. So what they did is they seconded me, and while she was on maternity leave, I took over and did her job. And so that gave me that happened to be that she worked at Disney, and it was a completely different experience than working in a law firm. When you work in a law firm, you don't know how a law firm is structured. I mean, I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know what a partnership was. I didn't know how it was structured. I didn't know how you become a partner at a law firm. None of that. I just knew I needed a high-paying job. And I got a job, and then I was doing banking work for that law firm. So I did a lot of that, and then I did some securities work. And so the idea is, there are two types of lawyers, basically. There's a transactional lawyer and there's a litigator. I had decided early on that I wanted to be a transactional lawyer. I didn't want to be a litigator. Which meant that I never had to go to court. I could just negotiate and draft contracts. And that's what I did. And what happens is you get trained at a very high level at these big law firms to do all of that in terms of negotiation, understanding contracts, those types of things. So in-house counsel or working for a big corporation as a lawyer gives you that opportunity to apply all the things you've learned in the law firm. So you're already trained. So in-house, they don't have to train you. So they could just give you a problem and you can start taking it on. So that's basically what I do.
So when you're transitioning from Berkeley to your first job, when you're doing the stuff over the summer and all that, how did it feel being Latino and transitioning to that environment and eventually going to Disney? How was that? It was like a kind of like culture shock, or like, and what did you do to overcome any adversity you had?
Well, the thing is that working at a big law firm, there were very few Latinos there. And it's still the case at these big law firms. There are very few Latinos there. So many of the issues that were happening, when I was there in the 90s are still happening now. They will pick, the best Latinos from all of these, top 10 law schools. And so there'll be one or two in each of these different law firms, or they're competing over the same student. So what happens is when you're in that law firm setting, you're still one, in of many others. They're just very few. So all of the skills that you've been kind of already learning by going to school where you're one of the few, or working in these different kind of, all of those skills you start applying to at work. So what I did, in addition to just trying to maneuver and trying to get mentors within the law firm, I also knew that I had to feed my soul by getting involved in the community. So that's why I got involved with Proyecto Pastoral in Boyle Heights. That's that I started right when the riots occurred, right when the civil disturbances in 1992. LA was burning. There was a lot of things going on, and I knew that I would not just be a corporate lawyer without kind of some idea that I had to give something back. And the way I gave that back was giving my services to Proyecto Pastoral, and I did the legal work for Homeboy Industries, for them to get incorporated. And, there's a lot of work that I had to do outside just to feel like a human, that I was doing something not just for myself, just making money. I had to give something back to the community.
Yeah. I had a quick question. Just going off the two organizations you mentioned in Boyle Heights, and it was the second one.
Homeboys.
Yes. What was that like? Was like going to those organizations? Can you give a little more about what you did and what those organizations are about?
It was really exciting because I don't know if you know Father Greg, but Father Gregory Boyle is this really iconic man who has really, I think, in a way, transformed Los Angeles in seeing itself less as a police state and more of a community policing city, and has really transformed this idea that formerly incarcerated people can really be very important contributors to the city, and that it's necessary because we're incarcerating so many people, and we're incarcerating so many of our Latinos. So they, men are getting pulled out, men and women, but more men than women are getting pulled out, being incarcerated. So now you have this void. Proyecto Pastoral, through all of its services, really tried to fill that need because of the structural racism of the city. The city itself was not giving resources to Boyle Heights, and especially after the civil rights, the civil disturbances and the riots. There needed to be organizations that would really, although there weren't that many riots in Boyle Heights area, there's still a lot of economic development that had to happen. And so Proyecto Pastoral was really very much involved in doing that work. So for me, it was thrilling, and it was important to be able to, any skills that I had from law school and also from being a lawyer, I could now apply them in a very constructive way. And I became the president of the board, and, we went through different, things, but anything that I gave to the organization, I got back tenfold. I mean, the people I met, especially the moms that I met, really transformed me. They changed me as a person. They made me aware that love was more powerful than anything else. That hope was more powerful than any structural racism or any setbacks or anything that really stopped people. I mean, and they became my teachers. They were really extraordinary people. They still are.
Well, really quick, going back to more of the diversity, what initiatives have you led to push and diversity inside the company itself?
So at every place I've been to, I've done that. I was president of my school at Princeton. I was president of the student council at Berkeley. When I came to Paul Hastings, I required them that I spend time at Maldev and kind of at the time, English only rules were like this big thing. So then I put together like this big pack of information regarding all of the English only rules in the country, using the resources of the law firm to get all of that research. So, which was really helpful for Maldef in terms of their litigation that they were trying to do in, all over the country. And so and then at Paul Hastings, I really got involved in the summer internship, program. So, and I always advocated for increasing the number of Latinos. At Disney, we've created a organization called DLOC, which is Disney Lawyers of Color, and we also have Latino Lawyers Outreach, which is an organization that I lead. So we're about 30 Latino lawyers, and we do outreach, and we try to do programming to retain lawyers, and we serve as a base for ensuring that we can advocate for Latino lawyers within Disney, and also have an opportunity to do work out in the community. So that's that, and for DLOC, I've been very much involved in that, and I'm, I'm on the board of the Western Center of Law and Poverty, so I give my time to that, and also BetSetic, which is also a legal services nonprofit for the poor in Los Angeles, and I was on the board of Oakwood, so very much involved in the community. Always trying to, even at Oakwood, we were trying to increase the numbers.
Actually, because we're almost out of time, I want to ask two questions. One, I was wondering, you mentioned earlier about a book you were writing. You mentioned it briefly. I was wondering if you want to touch back on that again, if you're willing.
So I'm now currently getting a master's in fine arts in creative writing. So I'm a student at the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I do that on the side. And I'm writing a novel which is based on the Popol Vuh. And the Popol Vuh is, as you know, is the creation story of the Maya. And I'm using that as a framework for telling a story of a boy and a girl who their father's always taking them to El Museo de Antropología in Mexico City, and they don't know why. And then one day he gets sick, and they go to the hospital, and he brings them in, and he says, "The reason we've been taking to El Museo for all these years is to find your mother. That was the last place that we saw her. She had a medallion, and she placed it on the Piedra del Sol, which is the Mexica Piedra del Sol, and she disappeared." So it's a story of the children trying to find her through, in the underworld of the Maya.
Okay. And then for my second question, with everything you've mentioned right today and what you've talked about and everything you've detailed of what you've gone through from Cornell and everything else, what is something you would tell a Latino, a person of color right now, or Latina, or Hispanic, whatever this person is listening to right now, who wants to go aim high and have dreams to go Cornell or try to go to law school or be a doctor, who have those dreams but feel like it's going to be hard or just it's going to be too much because they don't feel like there's this, they have a, how do I put this? What would you say in hindsight to a person of Hispanic descent or any minority who want to push themselves like you did? What would you say? What would you say to that person?
I think the most important thing is that you're not alone. I think the important thing is that there are people that will be your angels along the way. Like, I didn't do this all by myself. There were people along the way, like that administrator at Cornell, like, that person that got me my first job after I graduated from, she was in HR, and she took a chance on me and gave me a job in New York City for 3 years when I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank. Like the person that I didn't get accepted the first time at Princeton, but there was an administrator, a dean, that she looked out for me. And so I said, hey, well, what is it going to take for me to get into Princeton? And she said, well, you got to get a higher GMAT score. So I took classes at NYU, and I retook an algebra class just so I could get a better, because you needed a better quantitative skill number. And then I blew it out of the water the next time I took the GRE. And so I had all of the work experience. I had, Cornell. I had this ganas to get that, and they accepted me the second year. So the thing is there's always going to be angels out there that are going to help you. You just have to make sure that you reach out for them and you look for them and
just take advantage of the opportunities given to you.
Yeah, and just know that you're not alone. And sometimes the setbacks are the best thing for you, because sometimes maybe that's not the route you should go, and sometimes it just gets you angry, and you're going to go, I can do that. Just know that if you really want it, you can get it. It might take a little bit longer, and it might be a little bit harder, but, you are standing on some amazing shoulders. You're standing on the shoulders of people that can really change, and have changed the world. And so you definitely can do it.
I think, first off, to touch back on your story, I think it was an amazing story. I'm really looking forward to reading it, and I can't wait for it to come out. I mean, I would love to have you back on here when it does come out so you could talk about it. But with that said, I don't know if you wanted to touch on anything else.
No, that's what if you can send us a link to when it comes out where we can purchase it, we would love to read the book. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think, you said about just touching all the way back to the beginning, protection, and that it's something that's vital, especially today and nowadays with our president-elect, and just being Hispanic and having that understanding of our culture and understanding that, like you said, you are not alone. And that's something I wish I'd be driven home more to students, especially Hispanic students who are struggling in any environment that is whether it's be a predominantly white institution or they feel this is maybe they're first in their family to go to college, that you're not alone in this. And there's people out there, like you said, there's angels that will help you. You just have to reach out and take that chance, and believe with ganas. You're willing to put everything into it.
I think maybe you guys will remember just from the trip, there were two things that I like to say. Sí se puede is definitely one, and the other is no pasa nada. Yes. So, if you've tried and you've done your best, and you didn't succeed the first time, no problems, no pasa nada. Yeah. Just do it again. I think that's the thing. Especially, I think at this moment we need everybody. We need everybody on the boat. We need everybody to kind of do their best, and we definitely need people to get PhDs. We need people that are going to see themselves as the next change agents, and they need to get their education to really do that. And what we're finding is, people are not seeing themselves in those positions. So it's very important for you to find role models and then reach out to them and ask for help.
Yeah. With that being said,
actually, I hope that whoever is watching this, no matter what industry or race, you can find a role model in Rey. And, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come in here and talk about your story and tell us. I'm just grateful for that, and I hope that, people, and especially Hispanics and whoever is listening, understand that
and
it's
and
possible.
Learn from your story too.
Yeah,
it's possible to do these things. No matter how daunting the task might be, it is possible to reach for those goals, and you should.
Yeah, I'm honored. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for watching. If you're, please make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications. Thank you again, Rey, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. This is great.